Without further ado, I want to just thank Geraldine Kovats for being here. I've seen her work and collected her work for many years. She's just an incredible artist, and I can't thank Jamie enough for working with Geraldine to plan the program for today and heading up our efforts in all of our programming now in the future so that we've established our new committee. So take it away, Jamie, and we'll look forward to this presentation.
Thank you, Lorna. So great to see everyone this afternoon. Thank you for joining us. I'm Jamie Austin, San Francisco advocacy member and also director of exhibitions and public programs at CCA. And I've had the distinct honor to help moderate our series of virtual studio visits that we've been doing throughout COVID, and hopefully one day we will be beyond. And I'd like to give special thanks to Lorna and Kim and Robin and everyone in this group for their support of the series as a great way to help everyone stay connected. And I look forward to our next in-person meeting in the fall. I'd also like to announce that there's a new programming committee that's been established, and Lisa Lubliner, Julia Goodman, Catherine Clark, Susan Olick, and I will be collaborating to recommend and plan future group events that support women artists throughout the fall and spring. And after we meet again as a group in August, we'll have more ideas for how other members of the group can share your ideas with us as we grow this program together. But today's event features a presentation by artist Geraldine Kovats, who will be sharing some of her recent work with us. And you can see some behind her that looks beautiful. Geraldine is a Bay Area artist who creates landscapes, seascapes, portraits, figures, still lifes, and interior scenes, and has been painting for nearly 30 years. Currently, she's working at sites along the coast of California, spanning from Stinson Beach to Half Moon Bay. And our conversation today will include a presentation from Geraldine, a view of some of the work that you can see behind her, and then we'll have a Q&A time with the larger group. So with that, I'd like to pass the presentation over to Geraldine. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you for that introduction, Lorna and Jamie. I want to acknowledge Jamie for her excellent editorial advice. And I'm really grateful to you, Lorna and Robin, for making this studio visit possible and for your ongoing support of my work. I also want to acknowledge Kim for helping to coordinate the meeting. And thank you everyone for taking time to join in today. It's an honor to show you my work. So let me do a little screen share here.
Perfect. That looks great, Geraldine.
Okay, good. Welcome to my can you hear me, everybody? Welcome to my studio, which is located at sites along the coast. I bring my equipment, including a studio-sized easel, and work exclusively from life, from start to finish. I remain present in nature in order to experience its changing elements and to witness chance accidents, or you might say for when lightning strikes. This is the painting that I was working on in the previous photograph. As a professional painter, I've made several hundred works in a variety of media, but I prefer oils, and I use the best paints available for their beauty, for their versatility, and for lasting permanence. In the next 20 minutes, I'll explain how art became my life. I'll show you examples of portraits, still lifes, and landscapes, and offer some insights into my creative process. I saw this gruesome Rembrandt when I was 11 years old, and I never forgot it. Over the course of my life, certain artworks have been imprinted on my mind and some on my heart as well. These works have certain characteristics and qualities that make them memorable. I aspire to create works that have a lasting effect, like this. My journey in the visual arts derives in part from being born with poor vision. From the moment I wore my first pair of eyeglasses, seeing was a revelation. I took to drawing right away. Making drawings, especially of people, was a passion throughout my childhood, and that commitment continues today. Drawing is the bedrock of my practice. During my college years, I focused on drawing, painting, and sculpting the human figure from life. In my drawing, I would set challenges for myself, such as trying to visualize and draw a different side of the model than the one presented to me, or transform the figure into a different perspective or a different form. I also studied animation, and I later worked as an animator for 4 years. The experience provided a deeper understanding of the body in motion using principles of animation. Here is a person who was an excellent model for life drawing classes. You can see he has striking bone structure. And in this pose, an expression of melancholy. I think of portraiture as a fundamental artistic activity, and like most painters, I prefer to work with people I know well. This way, I can rely on my intuition, and less effort is needed in trying to obtain a likeness. Not surprisingly for me, a painting is one of the best ways to remember a person. But a finished portrait is also a record of the collaboration between sitter and painter. In this section, I'll share a few insights about 3 portraits. I created this painting of my maternal grandmother when I was 28 and she was 93. It was made from life in about 10 sessions. When I asked if she would be willing to sit for a portrait, she agreed, and she put on a stylish purple velvet dress, silk scarf, and pearl earrings. I wanted to capture her essential qualities and thought of accessories as extraneous or distracting. My grandmother understood it immediately, and she changed it into the simple teal turtleneck. She was so sweet to indulge me, and I knew even then that this was an act of love on her part. She was among the most talented people I've known, an actress and a singer who performed at the Sheraton Palace and live on KFRC radio in San Francisco. She made paintings and drawings and was instrumental to my development as an artist. These 2 artists are in their own spaces, seated at tables with candelabras. And this is one of my oldest friends, shown in an apartment in Mexico. The composition comprises numerous circles and semicircles that symbolize conscious and unconscious worlds. The terracotta tiles of the fireplace bear fleur-de-lis symbols. In keeping with the spiritual associations of this symbol and also the white candles, this is a person with a pure heart, and he's probably reading about Zen Buddhism. While working on my friend's portrait, I alternated between moving in close to the painting to make my marks and then stepping back to get a sense of the composition as a whole, repeating this process over and over until the work materialized. Working like this from life causes the background, middle ground, and foreground to reposition continuously with the painter's shifting line of sight. In other words, the scene isn't fixed like a still picture, and so I hadn't anticipated what began to appear on the panel. My innocent friend seemed to have black wings formed by the void of the fireplace. This artist makes abstract paintings that are richly colored and lyrical, like the one partially visible on the right side of the painting. The plant on the pillar in the corner looks like his radiating hair, and the shadow on the wall behind him represents a sort of twinning. He wore fashionable clothing, and here he struck a confident pose, but his facial expression is ambiguous. At the time of making this painting, I learned that a favorite story from his youth was The Little Prince. And like the Little Prince, he's an unusual person with certain otherworldly characteristics. It's worthwhile to appreciate humble, everyday things that we might overlook or take for granted. Even in these simple things, we can often experience something unexpected that moves us. Because my still life subjects depict man-made objects, I feel at liberty to change or move things around and to be creative with color. This process is a little different from my approach to natural subjects, where I remain faithful to what is presented to me. I mentioned drawing as the bedrock of my work. Color is the construct. I use it to probe more deeply into drawing, to convey depth and mood, and as an aesthetic principle, it's what I've become most fascinated by over time. It's impossible to completely control color, which led Claude Monet to say, "Color is my my day-long joy and torment." Next, I'll show you 4 still life paintings. The impetus to paint these 2 sinks was simple. I was attracted by the play of light and color, the tactile qualities of the smooth, reflective porcelain and chrome. I had a desire to load my brush with these rich colors and pull them down across and around a smooth surface. In addition to the visual sensation, there's also the imagined sensation of water running through our hands. A faucet can imply the running of hot and cold emotions. Sinks are amazing ritual objects that miraculously provide a continual precious resource. This small sink was in an Edwardian apartment, and I made the painting just before it was removed during a remodel. I was struck by the starkness of the white sink silhouetted against such dark stained wood. This 1950s sink, with its green and blue coloring, reminded me of an abalone seashell given to me by my husband. I placed it on the little shelf and reached for my paints. In this scene, the viewer stands over the basin. As in the previous painting, there's a hint of a mirror along the top edge. While working on this painting titled The Glass Ledge, I was thinking about Marcel Duchamp's large glass and its complex male-female symbols and dynamics, which leaves us with no resolution. I set up these 2 related still lives, one with predominantly female associations on the glass ledge, and the other with predominantly male associations just below. I wanted to paint an arrangement in whites, which can be an exciting challenge for a painter. Bathrooms usually offer the most illuminating light in a house, setting the stage for brilliant tones and colors and pronounced textures. The ceramic tiles in the background are depicted as following a curve rather than in linear perspective. The curvature is how we actually experience perspective due to the curvature of our eyes, but it is only noticeable when we make a drawing. The book cover on the left features a Picasso drawing of a dove with an olive branch, which hints at a possibility of an accord absent in Duchamp's work. This simple room in Mexico became my sick room after I came down with typhoid fever from consuming contaminated food or water. Then I was unknowingly taking antibiotics that were no longer effective against typhoid, and I nearly lost my life before getting better treatment. After becoming strong enough, I began spending time in the adjacent space, and one day I noticed the bottom of the curtain catching light from a nearby window. The brightening of the curtain made me see the room with a renewed perspective. My eyes went to the blanket where the red lines were now powerfully infused with sunlight, like a blood-red life force, then to the warm glow on the back wall, and finally to the shadowed urn in the recess. Thankfully, I didn't wind up in the urn. Because my mother's family is from San Francisco and my father was born in Point Reyes Station, the Bay Area's landscape feels like home to me. My coastal paintings are rooted in the kind of spirituality that arises when we spend time at one with nature. I scout for painting sites anywhere from Stinson Beach to Half Moon Bay, and I prefer off-peak hours. Being out there alone conjures a lot of emotions. If it's overcast or dark, I often sense sadness, but I don't want to cure it. There's something strangely inspiring about this feeling. My encounters with nature can feel like encounters with the divine. At other times, I'm reminded of suffering or even tragedy. I've also found myself in harrowing circumstances. I work purely instinctively. There are no plans, photos, or preliminary drawings. It's exciting to work this way and makes the end result more rewarding. The downside, of course, is that there are more failed starts. Here is a pile of broken branches formed into a hovel amidst a stand of trees. But maybe it also resembles the type of tabernacle in front of columns in stained glass. I was raised Catholic, and as a devout child, I looked closely at the art in and around the church, including statues, stained glass, and paintings. Religious rituals and Bible stories all made an impression on me. I came across this marvelous and mysterious shelter in a tree grove, and I wondered about its origins. I sketched the scene on a square panel, but found it to be lacking in impact, so I tried again on this long panel that conveys a sense of ascension. And while working on the painting, I frequently thought about the interior of Barcelona's Sagrada Familia Cathedral. The cathedral's interior is truly a sacred celebration of the natural world, and I greatly admire Antoni Gaudí, who declared, "Originality consists in returning to the origin." One morning after a sea storm, I visited the beach where I found 5 giant Pacific chitons washed up, a sign the storm had been powerful. I hiked to the top of a tall bluff and I came upon this barren, freshly downed tree. I was sure I wanted to paint it, but I also wondered if it would be possible due to its dense complexity. On the one hand, the torqued tree trunk and roots were pulling the surrounding earth upward. At the same time, the branches and twigs were being pulled downward by gravity and moving much faster than I expected. As the painting came into formation and the tangle of dead branches combined with fiery orange algae, I was struck by the fact that it looked like a big inferno. And after painting the work, I thought of Jackson Pollock's 1947 Lucifer, as much for the title as for the actual imagery. I pass by this tree often. It lives at the entrance to a state park. Many branches and limbs have been cut off, clearing a path for visitors. Yet trees are sentient beings. Most trees thrive in proximity to related families of trees and fare less well when isolated. These truths made me think about the sheer number of severed limbs the tree had endured. It was the survivor. After completing this work during the first year of the COVID pandemic, I thought of Saint Sebastian, a saint whose body was pierced by numerous arrows and survived. He is the patron saint of the plague. I remembered this painting by Andrea Mantegna, created directly following his own recovery from the plague. This beautiful eucalyptus tree stopped me in my tracks. It's unlike the eucalyptus found in the area, and it seemed like a tree that the 18th century French artist Fragonard would have liked. Of course, he would have made it look more beautiful than it looked in reality. As much as I loved the tree, after returning to it numerous times, stretching over months, the painting somehow never felt complete. Then one day, the pink lilies appeared as perfect color notes in just the right place. While I was working on this tree, I learned that it was going to be cut down to make room for new homes. Wanting to commemorate the tree's existence, I returned to the site and created 2 more paintings. Aria, the painting at the far right, was created during overcast mornings and exhibits delicate soft shadows. On the far left is Billowing, painted midday, and here you can see robust, strong shadows with wind in the leaves. The central canvas, Gum Tree, was made in the late afternoon. There's a sense of graying leaves and falling twigs, but it is still beautiful and vibrant. The 3 portraits of the tree can be placed together as a reinterpretation of a religious triptych. These 2 paintings depict the north and south ends of the same beach at different times of day and under different weather conditions. Sea Fog is located near Route 1, a pilgrimage route for tourists drawn to the scenery of the West Coast. This site in particular felt like a mini pilgrimage for me as well. The long walk from the beach entrance was made considerably longer as they carried heavy gear across shifting sands. The site is also part of the infamous Devil's Slide, so named for its steep cliffs, foggy weather, and many car accidents. In some cases, human remains have washed up on the beach. The power line cross on the edge of the cliff serves as a symbol of pilgrimage and death, and the near whiteout of fog makes us feel lost and unsure of what's ahead. Despite a sunny appearance, Washed Out, which was painted during a king tide, has darker undercurrents. While working on this scene, a solitary teenager wearing a backpack, who must have been cutting school, walked past me and sat on the rock right in the middle of the composition. So I painted him in. Although I was the only other person there and very conspicuous, he was oblivious to my presence and appeared to be heavily drugged. I saw him several more times at the beach, always alone and seemingly without destination or purpose. He kept returning to the beach, a reminder that we often turn to nature, especially the ocean, to alleviate our deepest pain. What you see here is the first stage of a painting. I wanted to capture the vertiginous feeling of standing on a cliff at the edge of the ocean, and at the same time I was going for a strong diagonal composition. I had taken my easel out in the late afternoon, and when I returned to the location, the wind had picked up significantly, so I anchored my painting using heavy twine tied to stakes in the ground. You can see the currents in the ocean and small areas of whitewater surrounding the rocks below. The next session was even more windy. I loved it, but in order to view this scene, I had needed to stand in the path of powerful gales coming up from the ocean. The wind pushed so hard against my painting that it pulled up the stakes, and I found myself flying my 3x3-foot painting in the air like a kite. So I quickly stepped away from the precipice toward a thicket of soft bushes and landed the painting there. I returned when the wind died down and the scene became placid. I painted this view as many times as I could, but windless afternoons are far and few between along the coast, so finally I changed to a morning scene. You can see a shift in light and the changes to all of the colors. The sky was grim, and the soil became wet and slick, increasing the risk of a long slide down the rocky cliff face. A bank of enveloping fog was fast approaching. I don't need to tell you that to be humbled by nature gets to the core of our existence. This is something we've all been experiencing acutely in the last few years. I try to give form to the sensations that I have in front of the subject as a means of understanding why the sight creates these feelings. I know on one level they come from my imagination, but seeing them reflected in nature provides spiritual solace. Reality exists in our own perception and is always changing. And because our memories fade, I am trying to intensify the memory. Before we go to any questions you might have, I'd like to briefly show you some of my paintings at full scale. Over here we have these early morning palm grove. I don't know if you can see this from here, but it's this painting over here. And I've just started that one, and the lone palm below, which is at the Marin Headlands. And it seemed to be not normally at the headlands. You wouldn't find a palm there. So I thought it was a good time to commemorate that palm. And then on the other side, we have the headlands over here, a bird's eye viewpoint. And I think I have one more session left on that one. And below that, there's a fireplace still life. And the fireplace still life is something I'm wrestling with. I've been working on it a long time. And I think it's a reminder that art is a good way to stay humbled. And then the ones in the middle you saw. And with that, I think I'd like to give it back to Jamie and see if you have any questions. And thank you, everybody, for taking time to listen.
Thank you so much, Geraldine. That was such a lovely presentation and so much detail. And, I loved how you moved us kind of inside and out of all of the paintings that you showed. Maybe I'll kick it off with the first question and then we can open it up to the group. I also feel like I'd just love to see more of the work that's behind you. You clearly have a strength for composition, which we can also see in how you've arranged the space behind you in, in the presentation. I'm curious, in seeing some of your still lifes where you talked about the composition and what you were hoping to achieve with the way you set it up, but then also sort of balanced with the kind of plein air drawing and not maybe having a plan and, painting what you see, kind of your feelings of how you balance, sight and composition, since sight was also how you began your presentation. Like, I'm curious if you would maybe just talk a little bit more about the relationship between sight and composition.
Well, thank you for the question. And let me make sure I understand your question. So you're wondering what it is that creates the composition.
Yeah, and how you balance, like maybe, for example, like with one piece you were saying that you were kind of looking for a diagonal sort of composition. And so I guess I'm thinking in the interior scenes, you can compose the placement, the items, or you add, pieces of symbolism around portraits of your friends. But when you're outside and it's a tree, perhaps you're painting a little more what you see, and like how much is exactly what you see versus how much you're always thinking about how to compose that landscape within the painting.
Right. So what I do when I'm outside is I look for something that strikes me first. And if I feel struck by it, then I'm hopeful that that will translate into a painting. It doesn't always. And of course, everything changes as you paint it. But so in that case, the example you gave about looking over the beach, and there was a strong diagonal composition, that is something that I noticed when I was out there, and then I thought this would be a nice composition. I'm noticing this strong diagonal. Mm-hmm. Partly because I've done a lot of paintings, I might think that way anyway. Does that make sense? And and then the composition is always dependent on what I'm trying to say. So for example, if there's the Saint Sebastian tree, what I need to say is that there are all of these cuts on this tree. So that determines what I am showing on the panel, and no more and no less. I like to try to keep it as edited as possible. So it's enough to show it's a tree, but it's mainly about what happened to the tree in this particular area, if that makes sense. And I hope I answered your question.
Thank you. The St. Sebastian example was a really helpful one. So I appreciate that. I'm going to open it up to the group and ask if anyone has questions. If you do, you're welcome, to jump in, or feel free to raise your hand. I can see everyone, in gallery view, and then you might just need to unmute yourself before you ask your question. You're also welcome to throw questions in the chat if you're not able to ask them yourself. I see Tara's hand go up.
Well, your work's beautiful and interesting. First, I want to tell you, I'm just really enjoying it, and your presentation is excellent. I wanted to just double check about the painting, which I thought you also covered composition in your subject matter as the sea with the diagonal and looking, and how the motion of the water comes around that. But there were many versions of that, and I just wanted to be clear. I know paintings can change through their course and your layering, but was that the same painting, or were those several paintings?
It was the same painting.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, really beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you.
That was so fantastic, Geraldine. Thank you so much. You're such a good presenter, and I love your work.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for that.
I'm curious, with your landscapes in particular, is there a particular site in the Bay Area that you view as being kind of an origin point for this direction that you've gone in? Is there one place where you painted that kind of solidified this path for you?
That's a great question. There are basically two origin points, and one of them was I really did start making up most of my landscapes, not all of them, but most of them, after I met my husband. And one of the places we like to go is where I have made a lot of paintings. And then there's another site that is really more toward Half Moon Bay that has this feeling about it. It's very hard for me to explain it, but it is the weather, the landscape, the feeling of standing on the cold soil in a tree grove there, and all of the amazing animals in the beach there that get washed up or that are in tide pools. That place for me just feels like something otherworldly. So I would say that there are two origin points, if that's okay.
Okay, I'll talk some more. I'm an artist myself, and I've worked with all sorts of mediums, and I used to do in plein air quite a bit a few decades ago for quite a long time.
Yes.
The figure, in like figure drawing, and also out and in plein air, like up in Abiquiu in New Mexico, with pastels, like boxes, and there would be a gust of wind come up and just go and throw your, so I know, and the light, everything about the elements being out there in nature is such a challenge already to set up, to get working. And so I completely understood what you're talking about. You have there on the edge of the ocean, the Pacific, which is so violent. But I mean, it takes a lot of, it's very challenging. So bravo to you to keep, it's amazing how many paintings you've done out there doing that like that. It's not easy.
Thank you very much for saying that.
I see Joe have a question, and then Robin.
Hi, Geraldine, your work is just beautiful. And I'm amazed at how large you work in plein air. That's got to be a real challenge. So you go back the same time of day several times?
Yes, I go back the same time of day unless for some reason that becomes impossible. So then I might change to a different time of day. And also, there are times when I'll go at a different time of day if I need to see it in another light to improve the drawing, if you will. So, you know how there's certain things that are revealed in late afternoon or in the morning. So I might choose another time of day to kind of understand the scene better. But generally, I'll try to, um, there's a, whatever struck me first, that's often what I keep going back for. That's the goal. Doesn't always work. And sometimes I get derailed and I like the new view better. Like that happened with that last one.
That's
So,
the problem.
yeah, that is the problem. Yeah, it's true.
So do you use photographs ever?
Never,
Never. Oh, wow.
never, never. No, it's against my religion. I
No.
say that because what I'm trying to get after is what's coming to me when I stand here. What is it? And, um, you know, if you were to take an object and you put it inside your house and you put a light on it and you looked at it and you painted it, and then you did that the next day and you did it the next day, and you would think that everything was the same. But your perception of it changes. And believe it or not, you'll start to think, well, I thought this was redder than it is today. These subtle things start to, And so if you're in front of some real object, there's always something coming to you. And that's the excitement of it. So if I have a photo, I don't have any desire to paint from that.
It's just,
It takes away from the whole point.
static.
Yeah.
It's amazing working from life.
It's gorgeous work.
Well, thank you very much. And
Geraldine, I have a question.
Yes.
Hello.
Hello,
As
Rob.
you know, you're one of my biggest fans, and I would love to show everyone what Geraldine did for me.
Oh.
And I'd love for you, Geraldine, to explain how you painted my precious Carmela.
Okay. Well, so let me say, first of all, that Robin wanted a portrait of Carmela. And I want everyone to know that I have worked in commercial arts for many, many years. So I've had to make pictures from photos. And although I don't do that with my own work, I do maybe make a commission or something like that. So what I did is I asked Robin to send me as many photos as she could to try to get Carmela from babyhood puppyhood all the way up into adult. And how many photos did you send me, Robin?
Oh, I sent you at least 25, but I also sent you videos. You looked at the videos. And so I want you all to know, this is Geraldine painted this from all the various photos. This was not a photo that she just looked at. It was just from all the different photos and videos. And it is so special.
Yeah, and it's not easy. So I did look at, and she wanted the puppy look, remember?
Yeah.
From Carmela. So, there's a red robin bush behind there, and there's some forget-me-nots and a little butterfly and all of that. So yeah, that was
meant
a
a lot.
special thing for Robin.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Cool.
Other questions or comments for Geraldine? I can keep
I do have a comment and maybe a question. And Geraldine, if you don't want to discuss this, please, you don't have to. But you just touched on some of your more commercial work. And I have just always thought it was so fascinating because I've always been fascinated by animation and how artists could paint so many different clips of an object to make it move and make it real. And would you want to talk a little bit about some of that previous work you did and some of the things you did, and or is that something that you would rather not talk about today?
No, I'm happy to talk about that. I did work both as an animator and a background painter in animation. And I will tell you what you touched upon, Lorna, is absolutely true. Animators have, I think, one of the most thankless jobs there is, because you have to make something like 24 drawings per second in order to just get 1 second of motion. So you can imagine if you want to make something for 10 minutes, how many drawings that is. So it is an amazing amount of work, whether it's done digitally or traditionally. Background painting I did for 5 years. I think it was 5.5 years at Disney. And, you know, I will tell you that I actually wanted to take that job because I had done so much work with the figure and portraiture that I felt like I needed to learn more about painting environments, trees, backgrounds, you know, things like that. I felt like I needed it. So that was my job, was to paint backgrounds for 5 years. So, you know, I'm very grateful for that experience. It taught me a lot about color and mood and staging, and I worked with some extraordinary artists. And it was a very special place to work. And the other thing about Disney is their response when you turn a painting is, can you make it more beautiful? Can we make it more beautiful? You know, they have deep pockets. They're not about, you know, turn it in tomorrow. They don't care. Let's make it the best it can be. And so it's a really, really wonderful place to work. Now, of course, this is going back a long time ago, but because I worked in traditional animation as a painter, but it was wonderful. And I do think it brought a tremendous amount of learning and whatever to, you know, it's a lot of brush mileage, let's say. I think each painter, there were about 10 background painters, and each one did about 150 paintings per film.
Well, that's amazing.
So it's a
You
lot.
were, which of the films were you involved in? Anything that, in particular, or just many projects?
No, not very many projects because they take a long time. So I worked in watercolors on Lilo and Stitch. I worked in on Tarzan. I worked on Mulan. I worked on a short called John Henry and Brother Bear. So, yeah.
That seems like quite a lot. Well, I wouldn't want to, I think that, Robin, that was so nice that you showed the picture of Carmela. And I have to say, maybe if some others have questions, do you think I should show my Rembrandt? While you all talk, I'm going to go get something.
Does someone else have a question? Otherwise.
I have a question. What is the painting behind you? Is that a painting? No. Jamie.
Oh, sorry. This is a sculpture. It's a pumpkin sculpture by Yayoi Kusama that was in a Japanese island called Naoshima. And so I took this picture. I was there, but last year there was a typhoon and it was washed off the pier and into the water. So
Wow. Did they rescue it?
it's back in her studio, but it's no longer publicly visible.
Well, it makes a great backdrop, and you have the right color sweater on her blouse. Looks great.
Thank you. Well, Geraldine was so good at matching her greens with the painting. I was following in her footsteps.
I want to show you also, this is the painting I have from Geraldine.
That was in here. Wait, hold on, Robin. I'll spotlight it. That was
okay.
Okay, do it again just so we can all see it. That was in the presentation.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
Nice.
well, now that we're doing our show and tell, I don't know if you're going to be able to see this. Does it come out or is it too dark? Oh, I think it's too dark.
A little dark, but
Yeah.
Seeing a black circle.
I can
Well,
see
the reason we call it Rembrandt because it's painted in the style of Rembrandt. And when you come to my house, I'll show it to you. It's the most beautiful painting of our dog Murphy. So anyway, I'm sorry you can't see it better because it just looks black now, but it's truly beautiful. Anyway, sorry for that interruption.
Thank you. It was very sweet of you. Very sweet. Thank you.
Well, I just want to say, Geraldine, that was phenomenal. The work that you put into this presentation, the way you executed it, and your work, your presentation is very reminiscent of the quality of and the depth of your work. Just perfectly beautiful. So we really can't thank you enough. And I am so glad that we had so many people here, and I'm so pleased that you would take the time to do this for us. And I'm glad that Jamie has the video because we can send this to the people that weren't able to join us today, so everyone can be able to share. So that we can share what you've presented. So we just can't thank you enough. And does anyone else have any comments or anything they'd like to say? We'd certainly like to hear from more of you if you have a moment to think of something that you'd like to say.
I see Carol there.
Hi, Carol.
You might have to unmute, Carol.
Unmute. Your mute button.
How's that?
Good.
Hi, Carol.
I understand that you're not represented in a gallery, but how can we see more of your work on occasion? Do we call you individually, or how does that work?
Yes, that would be fine. I have a website, and there's a contact form on there, and I would be happy to show you anything you'd like to see.
Thank you.
And thank you for asking.
I just put Geraldine's website link in the chat if you want to click on it, and then you can save it.
Yeah, beautiful work and beautiful presentation. I'm curious as to, are you doing mainly the plein air work now, or are you still doing interiors? And if you have kind of moved in that direction, can you talk about why and how it's different? How the plein air is as a different experience for you than the interiors?
Sure. Well, that's a great question. And the answer is, I am primarily making landscapes because I have this interest in it, but it is dependent on weather to a degree. And so sometimes I find myself, I need to just paint something at home. And that's where these still lifes come in.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll notice there are fewer of those. Portraiture, as I mentioned, was my first love, but it's almost impossible to get people to sit for a portrait. It is, different times than the old days when people were getting their portrait painted. They're mostly done from photos now. And so I would be happy to make portraits. I'm happy to make still lives, but I do have this commitment to the landscape right now. And I also feel a little bit of an urgency based on what's going on with the climate. I can see changes at the beach that are very surprising in a very short amount of time. And there are things that happen with the sea stars. There are things that happen with the cliff face of the rock falling into the ocean. And the changes are quick. And where I used to stand sometimes at the beach, there's no longer a place to stand, things like that. So I do feel like I always like to paint something where there's an urgency, and the landscape has that now. Mm-hmm. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, very interesting. The interiors especially, there's such a loving gaze on these very simple, basic, a sink, a towel. And it's almost like you paid such close attention that it's like I don't know, makes it so much more than an everyday kind of object. It's kind of a very loving glance or gaze at these everyday objects. Really enjoyed it a lot.
Thank you for noticing. That means a lot. Thank you.
Do I have time to show one more piece of Geraldine's? It was actually my first piece.
Go for it. We'll all give Geraldine a collective round of applause while you, and then you can change your scene. But let's all thank Geraldine for that amazing.
Thank you, everybody, for coming and for your time.
Right here.
I'm so grateful. Thank you
Yeah.
very much.
Yeah.
Nice. You
right.
see?
Yes,
We do.
That's fabulous.
beautiful.
Geraldine, do you want to talk a little bit about the chair?
This chair, and it's got a box that's not been opened, and there's some little heels tucked under the chair, and it's mysterious, and I'm going to leave it mysterious.
Perfect. Well done.
Well, we have about 3 more minutes. If anyone else would like to make a comment, Julia or Eileen.
Well, I just have I'm just interested in how you were so attracted to Rembrandt as a child. That's the first artist that I fell in love with, and I always say Rembrandt was my first love. And so, you know, I just wonder, do you feel like any of that still infuses your work?
Well, the one thing that I think I see in Rembrandt is he plays and he's tricky, you know, like there's a piece at the Legion where he has there's a man with a musket, and I don't remember the title, Joris de Collier, I think. And I can see Rembrandt's shadow and his easel, right, lying on top of that man. And he's putting himself in there, you know. And then the anatomy lesson, the one that I showed, if you look at that painting, so I learned that all of those people paid to have themselves put in that painting, and the doctor pays the most. But what really got me at 11 years old was the turned open arm, right? You know, I was horrified by it, and, you know, and just that was one of those pictures that stays in your mind, these pale faces and black clothes and emerging out of this dark space. And I saw the original at The Hague a few years ago, and I noticed that none of the men in the picture are looking at the corpse. Only we are. Now that may be by design or it may not be, but he was young when he painted it. But I believe Rembrandt did he may have done that by design.
Thank you.
But yeah, so you know, first of all, it's just imagery that stays with you because it's simple and beautiful, and it's just everything, you know. And I love Titian, and I love Kathy Kollwitz, and I love Bridget Riley is another one where I almost fell over in front of a Bridget Riley. But yeah, I love looking at art. Just love it.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Your work is really beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Very inspiring.
Nice to meet you. Thank you.
Julia, I think you had a comment, and then.
Well, I was just gonna say, I had never thought about the sink in terms of, I will think about the sink differently from here on out. And so I really appreciate that when an artist kind of forever can shift your perspective about something that maybe I sort of taken for granted. So thank you. And then I guess the other thing I would ask with the landscapes, you're kind of bound to a specific palette, especially because you're staying in one coast or in one area. And I'm just wondering, do you ever crave like a different landscape, or how do you go,
That's a great question.
or
Yeah.
other colors, for example, like, or I mean, there's so many possibilities within what you're doing, clearly. But I'm just curious, like, yeah, if you would, yeah, where it goes from there.
Yes, that's a very good question. And the answer to that is that it's when I'm out there, all of that sort of somber mood is going on generally. And so then I'm feeling that way, and that's the way I'm going to paint it. And that's how I feel about it. And that's just fine because this is something that it's one emotion, you know, or more than one, but it's a tone. And then, you know, when you put a lot of color in something, it raises the mood to become more
Yeah.
uplifting. So the one that I'm doing now, you can see that palm over there has a very bright blue sky. That is more unusual, but I did see that as kind of a happy thing there. So, but yes, that is absolutely true because I did a lot of my work is very much more colorful, and the landscapes are all more somber colors.
Yeah, you really do capture the Northern California coastline spirit and palette. So,
Well, thank you for your wonderful
Thank you.
presentation, and I was also
Oh,
taken
thank
by the fact that you changed to texture. You said
oh,
changed to want to have that sensation, and I thought that was very powerful. So thank you for your presentation. I enjoyed it very much.
oh, thank you. That's very kind. Well, thanks.
Thank you, everyone. And I'll pass it to Lorna if there's any, last announcements that you'd like to make before we sign off.
No, I think that that was all. And just again, Jamie and Geraldine, thank you so much. And unless anyone else has anything, I think we can say good evening.